I pay homage to the Gautama who, moved by his compassion, taught us the sacred Dharma to rid us of all views. Yesterday, I think I forgot to recite this verse of salutation from Abhisamaya Lamkara. Through the knowledge of all, the Shravakas seeking peace are led to true peace. Through the knowledge of the path, those intending to benefit transmigrant beings fulfill the aims of the world. Through the being perfectly endowed with it, the omniscient mind, the Muni sages give various teachings with all kinds of aspects. I bow down to the mothers of the Buddhas together with their communities of hearers and bodhisattvas. And then the salutation verses from Mulamadhyamaka Karika. So to the audience mainly, to the Indian audience and others, as I said earlier, yesterday, many people have gathered here. Some have come from far away places. And all of us want happiness and do not want suffering. So even insects move to seek happiness and avoid suffering. So this is something that does not need to be reasoned out. So it's something that is our own direct experience. We can see this. But what we need to use reason for is, although all of us want happiness, not suffering, but you need to check what is the short-term and long-term benefit, and what is the long-term short-term suffering. So just as you, as an individual, want happiness, not suffering, the others also do not want suffering, but want happiness. So you need to think the pros and cons of thinking of selfish happiness and happiness of all others. And so, as human beings having this marvelous intelligence, we need to really give thought to this seriously. As scientists have said, I think I mentioned it yesterday, that the basic human nature is compassionate. Compassionate. So here, the scientists are not talking about, or we are not talking about compassion in the sense of religious practice, religious matter, but just as you appreciate the compassion and love from others to you, and you also have the potential to spread that love and compassion to others as well. So, just as you yourself do not want suffering but want happiness, we need to train our mind to reflect on and train our mind to think that others also want happiness, not suffering, and we need to develop compassion towards them. So in the world, people are tossed by love, hate, and anger, hate, hatred, and so forth. And therefore, all the religious traditions teach love, compassion, patience, and tolerance, and contentment. So in the Indian traditions, within the mind, they have done analysis into what brings about happiness and what brings about suffering to us. And according to this Indian tradition, the sensory perceptions or sensory faculties are the medium of our objects. And the main pain and pleasure has to be understood on the basis of the mind itself. And therefore, in training the mind, in Indian tradition, there is the practice of vipassana and samatha. single-pointed concentration, and penetrative insight, critical analytical insight. So, India is the place where the Buddha appeared, and particularly in this place where the Buddha became enlightened. And therefore, we need to pay attention to the serious experience that is the main mental pain and pleasure. So many people are more or less carried away by the sensorial experience of pain and pleasure, and they are more or less satisfied with it. So even if you may have all the amenities, necessities and facilities for your life, and if you have no peace of mind, these amenities will not give peace, and the sensorial experiences and objects will not give real pleasure to you. Whereas if you have peace of mind, even if you lack all these external facilities, you will still be able to maintain your peace of mind. And so it's important to distinguish between the sensorial experience and the mental experience. And many of the scientists also have paid attention to the sensorial experience more than the mental ones. But today, this is changing. Therefore, they are paying more attention to this inner mental experiences. And therefore, in the Indian tradition, we have the practice of using the mental experiences, paying attention to the mental pain and pleasure more than the sensorial ones. Let's have the tea. For that, you say this blessing. The qualities of the Buddhas are inconceivable, the qualities of the Dharma are inconceivable, the qualities of and the mental experience of pain and pleasure, and the latter is much more serious. So in India, since the ancient times, on the basis of the mind, they have recognized how pain arises on the basis of the mind, and how happiness is drawn on the basis of the mind, not so much focusing on the sensorial experience. So the unhappiness that we experience in our mind. So with regard to that, in the Indian tradition, there is a recognition of the mental afflictions. So mental afflictions are defined as those experiences which no sooner they arise, they give the unpleasant experience in us. And so this includes those of hatred or anger, jealousy, and so forth. You can actually, without taking it as a religious matter, just on a in a general sense, you can see how these experiences create unhappiness in us, disturb our peace of mind. So however much you may have, the more you have attachment towards the external things, the more there is a chance that you will tend to have anger when you face with some kind of obstacle to achieve that goal that you are attached to. So in the Indian tradition, there is an acknowledgement of our attachment giving rise to unhappiness. And so, within attachment, there is an attachment towards the essential objects that are external. And therefore, in the non-Buddhist traditions also, the practitioners have undergone, they undergo austere practices, notwithstanding any kind of hardships, and to overcome attachment to the essential objects. And there is also the distinction of the desire ram, form ram, and formless ram. So 3 planes of existence is categorized. So when I met one non-Buddhist practitioner one time, I asked, what are the on the basis of what reason do you make this division into the desire ram form and formless rams? So he didn't have any reason. But if we think through, give thought to it, within the mind there are those of the subtle levels which we can develop, which are the single-pointed concentration, which do not run after the the sensorial objects of perception. And within that also there are degrees of subtlety. And so, on the basis of this kind of samadhi, or this degree of subtlety within the mind, perhaps the distinction between the three planes of existence is made. The division was made. And so, they're seeing the faults of the faulty nature of the desire ram, sensual objects. The practitioners developed that of the equanimity. And therefore, there is the practice and the presentation and explanation of the that of the form and formless rams, which have to do with the practice of concentration and seeing the desire ram experiences of sensual pleasures as being gross as compared to the higher planes of existence, experience of samadhi in the highest planes of existence. So I have said that Buddha was a product of the Indian tradition, and Indian tradition is not the product of the Buddha himself. And so, since he was born within that milieu of the Indian tradition, of course, he had collected immense merit and wisdom for over many eons, and therefore developed the single-pointed concentration and vipassana, and therefore through his wisdom, penetrative wisdom, he was able to see that all the problems that we face, including those of the afflictive emotions, arise from our grasping at some kind of independent self. And so the Buddha was a product of the Indian tradition. And within this tradition, there is a distinction between the desire ram experience and the experience of the higher planes of existence. And so the problems that we experience are recognized or acknowledged as the product of our mental afflictions. And therefore, there is the practice which sees the faulty nature of the desire ram afflictive emotions, afflictions. So with regard to these mental afflictions, the three main afflictions are recognized, which are attachment, anger, hatred, and ignorance. And therefore, there are practices which I mentioned yesterday also. For example, to counter our attachment, there is the meditation on the repulsive nature of our existence, the body, and so forth. And to counter anger, there is the practice of love. And also to counter our pride or arrogance, there is the practice of developing more knowledge. As you have gained more and more knowledge, your arrogance from little knowledge subsides. So it helps to have greater knowledge to counter your pride or arrogance. So the more you are educated, knowledgeable, the less you will be. You should be arrogant. And so all these mental afflictions arise on the basis of our ignorance. And therefore, the antidote to this ignorance is the antidote to all the other mental afflictions. Did I quote this verse just as the physical bodily faculty permeates all the whole body? Likewise, ignorance permeates all other mental afflictions, and therefore, when you overcome this ignorance, all the rest of the afflictions are overcome. And so the Buddha taught various philosophical ideas in accordance with the mental afflictions of his disciples. For example, for the Madhyamakas who say that there is not an iota of intrinsic existence in anything, whatever, even in conventional terms. So, therefore, these Madhyamakas are termed as nihilists by other philosophical schools. And for Ayadeva says, by seeing interdependent nature of things, ignorance will not arise. And therefore, the first one should introduce the teaching of the Buddha through the teaching of emptiness. And so, of course, in order to counter our mental afflictions, the techniques and the teachings come from understand interdependent nature of things. It actually helps arisen. So we are not talking about past and future lives or anything like it, but whether it's politics or economics or environment, health, care, I mean, this idea, understanding of the interdependent nature of things really is helpful to see things holistically. When you remain selfish, then out of self-cherishing attitude, you see that you are foolish. It's really ignorant to do that. When you see the interdependent nature of everything, you see this being selfish is all foolish. In the 400 verses, it is said that when you doubt about the hidden teachings, the obscure teachings which deal with the obscure objects taught by the Buddha, you need to be introduced to the teaching of the Buddha on the basis of by understanding and by receiving teachings on emptiness. So, interdependent nature of things is something that even scientists appreciate. So I don't talk with them about past and future lives and so forth, but interdependent nature of things. So it's not just to be able to enumerate how many times we can actually say that things are interdependent. Someone wants to add something. So with regard to our this verse from the 400 verses, which says that the bodily faculty permeates all other faculties, whereas the other specific faculties like the eye faculty or the auditory.
So the root of all the afflicted emotions is the ignorance, and even in the ignorance also we may categorize it into different types, but the nature of the all ignorance is not understanding the reality. And as in the 400 verses already was stated, there's the body faculty pervades all our body parts. And similar to what Chandrakriti has stated in the middle way philosophy, that the grasping of the self as inherent existence is the root of all the afflicted emotions and other problems within us. And he pointed out that the grasping of the self, the true existent, is the source of all the problems and all the afflicted emotions. So there is an agent that actually agent which is related to a person that experienced the happiness and the suffering. So when it comes to the categorization of the selflessness, the two selflessness pertaining to the person and the phenomena is not due to its object of negation, but due to this basis. But the other Buddhist philosophical tenets has different views on that. So Chandrakriti's, the text of the luminous, the lucid, explanatory, and other the commentary text to the fundamental wisdoms. So then these explanations will be very clear to us, and also to our own experiences and what scientists is stating nowadays through their experiment is something very evident for all of us. So we need to have more discussions and the dialogue with the scientists. So in this way, from the heart of our heart, we will gain a conviction that this is it and there is no any other way. So merely not relying upon the scriptural sources is not enough. So we have to contemplate further. Is very important. So in order to contemplate, we need a doubt preceding it first. So the doubt helps you to analyze and experiment. So without any doubt, and if you accept it 100%, then there won't be any area for discussions and analyzations. But within the doubt also, there are some afflicted nature, which is a different case. But generally, a doubt is beneficial for us. And to summarize, as Buddha says that the Buddha himself will not wash the sins of his followers, and so on. So this summarizes that the grasping of the self is the source of all the afflicted emotions. So consideration of the I as a solid and objective from its own self is present in all of us. So when that kind of thought arises, so when you point to your hand and check whether that is the I, and also when different thoughts arise, whether that kind of the thought is I, the self or not. So in this way, if we analyze further, try to pinpoint to an object which is the self, then it is very difficult to come to a point of reference, to point to a particular object, to consider it as a self. So due to the basis of the characteristics, meditating of selflessness on the phenomena is a little bit harder and more difficult compared to the meditating the selflessness on person. So the reason is that when we think about the person, automatically we come to a thought that there is not a objective or inherent self present within us. So even when we have such kind of experiences that there is not a solid presence of I within us, this kind of thought may not be still the ultimate realization of selflessness. And the same thought, when we bring it to the other phenomena which are other than self, so if we are able to gain a similar kind of realizations that there is not a single existence of self, even for the phenomena, so at that time we are said to realize the emptiness. So this is the third sentence coming from Chandakriti, that's self as the object of that graspings, that we have to understand it. And also, as Aryadeva says, that as long as we have the grasping for the self, grasping for the aggregates, so the grasping for the self will still exist. And if there is a grasping for self, then it will lead to further rebirths in the world. And also, what are the aggregates? So aggregates itself is actually again formed by the different elements, and even these elements, when we pinpoint to them, like water elements and earth elements and the further constituents, we won't be able to find a solid presence of any aggregates or constituents. So when we analyzed further experiment the object of the true grasping, so we won't be able to locate even a small point to where we can locate the self. So in this way, we will be able to destroy even the subtle object of the self graspings. And from the teachings of the Buddha, the view and one's behavior. So when it comes to the behavior, the non-violence is taught by all the major religious traditions. But when it comes to the view, which is the unique teachings, so the different religious traditions have their own explanations. And the unique tradition, the unique teaching of the Buddha here is the teaching on the presentation on selflessness. And also the selflessness here is merely not negating the existence of a self, but with the very true reason of the dependent arisings. Due to the self being a dependent arising, therefore there is not an inherent existence. And though the self exists, but it doesn't exist from its objective side. It exists as a mere label, a mere name, and mere designation. And as the school children recites the Heart Sutra in Sanskrit, so the perfection of the Wisdom Sutra are the main texts which teach on emptiness, and the Heart Sutra is the concise of all these texts. And in this verse, that all the five aggregates should be also seen as emptiness, empty of its own and inherent existence. And there is a term that also the five aggregates. So here the term also has two understanding, two meaning. The first one is that the self being inherent, empty of inherent existence. So not only that, even the aggregates are empty of its own inherent existence. So that is one understanding. Then I think there is another meaning to it. So in the first tenet of the will of the Dharma, the Lord Buddha taught about the Four Noble Truths, the truth of cessations and the 12 interdependent link. And due to the ignorance and the karma comes, the formation comes, and the consciousness, and ultimately to the aging and the death and so on. But here, the agent has not been explained. Who is the person that will encircle this samsaric world? So when Lord Buddha taught the first tenet of the will of the Dharma, Lord Buddha has taught very clearly that there is not a presence of a self as being asserted by the non-Buddhist scholars and non-Buddhist school. So when it comes to the second will of the turning of the Dharma, so Lord Buddha present that not even the self, but also the aggregates and the phenomena which is other than the persons also do not have its own existent objective existence. So therefore, in these phrases of the Heart Sutra, when it comes to the also, so this must be the second meaning. And there is the four emptiness coming from the Heart Sutra, that the form is empty, and emptiness is also form, and form is not different from emptiness, and so on. So when it comes to the form, it's something which is very common and related to all of us with these colors and different shapes. So therefore, they took that as a point of reference to understand emptiness. When the different colors and the shape with its parts and all those objects that appear to us, it exists in front of us. Even the insects can see it, and everyone can experience and see it. So that kind of the form, not being satisfied with its mere appearance, if we further analyze its real identity, for example, take the reasoning coming from the mind-only schools about elimination of non-existence of an external phenomena. The Chidamatan school says that since the small minute particles by nature they are moving, so therefore even when it comes to the smallest particles, they do have a part and they are not partless. So since they have a part and not partless, so form itself is again another object which is formed by different small particles. So form itself, when the form appears to us without being analyzed, it appears as a solid object. But when further analyzed in our mind, the form will cease to exist as we perceived. So therefore, since the form doesn't exist from its own inherent existence, so when further analyzed through this way, so that will cease to exist in our mind. So when we analyze where are the flowers and those things, so generally these things exist when not subject to this kind of analyzations. So if something has its objective existence, then it should be also found by the mind that analyzes the nature and existence of this object through multiple reasonings. So all the forms and the other phenomena appear to our mind in this way. But if we analyze further whether they do have their real objective existence, it is similar to what I have said before through the quantum physics experiments. Yesterday, did I told you about Rajaramana? He's a nuclear physicist. Rajaramana. He's passed away now. Many years before, I met him during one of the conferences in New Delhi, and he told me that quantum physics is a new concept in the Western world, but in India, the concept of the quantum physics has been existing since 2000 years. And he also cited the sources from one of the texts of Master Nagarjuna, and I think this is really true. So when we also analyze from the quantum physicists from the quantum physics, so things cease to have their own objective existence. So therefore, in the Heart Sutra, it says the form is empty. And now the second one is more important, that the emptiness is also form. So this second line tells us about an understanding of the emptiness, that not merely existence of a phenomena is not emptiness. So these forms exist in a way being dependent upon their causes, their origins. So since they are rely upon different causes, so therefore they do not have their inherent existence. So therefore the functions of the causes and the conditions play an important role in the existence of the form. I do not remember a citation here from Nagarjuna. So if the things have their own objective existence, then they do not need to rely upon
용토에 차윤도 대용약이 내가 대용약이 시서 털도 돼 뭐니지 못 주고 인상 아니 편전 중에 속속 처리의 중보로 재산가 수 정신지 주변 동에 간다 된저기다 간다 정신전지 뭐 인도산에建设了 对吧的台湾人建设了对吧的台湾인도산에 아니建设완게 다 입도 가서도 최종으로 서도 3월로 있는 그게 샤피아 정도가 재성 동반이 속속스 다음은 된저기 남해찬의 속속 동배찬의 정신 동과 어다 대낭동의 아니 시지기 때문에
in appearance as an empty, so when we understand an emptiness, emptiness has to be again based on an object. So without in relation to an object, one cannot gain any understanding of emptiness. So therefore, the emptiness is not different from the form, and form is not different from the emptiness. So the third line becomes evident, relevant here. So through this, as the Chandakriti states, the teaching on the two truths come here. From the ancient Indian school of Samkhya traditions, they speak about 25 objects, and also a principle, a fundamental principle, and the self as an ultimate truth. Then the other 23 phenomena are conventional truths. So this is coming from one of the most famous Indian traditions, the Samkhya traditions, and also all the major non-Buddhist traditions speak about two truths. So this comes to the summarize that there is a difference between appearance and reality. I have a friend, a Christian friend, and he told me his understanding about selflessness and the self as appeared to our mind, that is independent. But when you analyze and experiment further, then there is no other than a self that is a creation of the Buddha. So therefore, since there is nothing which is different from the one that is created of the self. One of my friend, a Christian, asked me that when we get a strong sense of I, so what method should we do to reduce that? Then I told him that in Buddhism we speak about selflessness, but I think you should consider in this way, contemplate in this way, that all the phenomena and the things in this world, the animals and the things and objects, are the creations of the God. And the self is just a mere one of those many creations. So therefore, there is nothing to feel boast or pride of the self. So in this way, if you think in this way, it may be helpful. And in this way, the very boastful, that feeling very pride about that sense of self will be helpful to reduce. So it is important to first recognize the ignorance, then from there the grasping of the person and the phenomena, two different graspings, and the self-centered feeling. When the self appears to that kind of mind, the self is not being analyzed further. A generous self is also appear to that mind. But to those afflicted emotions, a very strong self appears to a mind in a way that it has its own objective existence. So therefore, Chandakriti says that due to the sentient being not able to see the nature of selflessness, they recycle and born again in the world of samsara. So, to summarize, the antidote of the ignorance is not, there is no other than the wisdom realizing emptiness. So, contemplating and meditating on compassion is also not possible here, since they are not totally contradictory to each other. So, generally, the afflicted emotions and their antidotes are similar to.
Does not mention the person as such. So, if you really give thought to the fourfold emptiness taught in the Heart Sutra, then you also come to the point in the Heart Sutra that all the Buddhas of the three times become perfectly enlightened. And so how does someone become enlightened, fully enlightened? Is through the process of going along or progressing along the path of beginning with the path of accumulation, path of application or preparation, and path of seeing, path of meditation, and then finally that of bodhi. And so, by studying the texts on Madhyamaka, philosophical texts on emptiness, and also those of the Abhisamaya Alamkara and commentaries and so forth, you will be able to really reflect on the progression along the path, the path to enlightenment, beginning the fivefold path, we could say here, particularly the Mahayana path. The first path is when you have the genuine experience of bodhicitta. For those of a sharper faculty within the Mahayana, those who have the imprint for Mahayana, this arises on the basis of the realizing emptiness. As Madhyamaka Avatara, the Entering the Middle Way says, you don't just feel sad for the suffering of sentient beings, but you actually check what has caused these beings to suffer. And therefore you see that due to the view of transitory collections or perishable aggregates, the beings have held on to an independent self, and thereby cause themselves to create karma, and they suffer. And therefore, though things and persons and beings do not have any independent existence, yet sentient beings suffer due to this view of perishable aggregates. So, you see the possibility for them to be free from this clinging. So if you see someone being driven or drowning in an ocean, of course, if you can't swim, you can't do anything. You just feel sad for the person. But when you actually see there's a possibility to save the person, you will go forth. And therefore, the person will not be left alone. And therefore, the bodhisattvas with sharp faculty first seeks that of the wisdom of emptiness, realization of emptiness. And in the commentary perhaps by Vimukti Sena, His Holiness is mentioning Genang, or the bodhisattvas focus on sentient beings with their compassion, and they focus on that of enlightenment, Buddhahood, with their wisdom. And so this shows that the bodhisattvas of sharp faculty develops the wisdom of emptiness first, and then goes on to develop bodhicitta. And so, with the help of wisdom of emptiness, when they first develop bodhicitta, genuine experience of bodhicitta, they have entered the path of accumulation of Mahayana. And then, when they have developed the wisdom, the wisdom or the understanding of emptiness through meditative process. In the meditative process, they have developed the path of preparation, and when they see emptiness directly, they have entered the path of seeing, which is referred, the first two paths are referred by Gate, the first two Gates, Gate, and then the third path of seeing is referred by Paragate, and then the Parasanga they refers to that of the path of meditation, and Bodhi refers to enlightenment. And so if you could really have a good understanding of these progression along the path like that, and when you say Gate, Paragate, Parasangate, Bodhi, Swaha, it will make real sense, good sense to you. Otherwise, it's just like parroting. And so, with regard to the reality on the ground level, there are the two truths, and then we progression on the basis of the two truths. We progress along the path, develop the path, and then as a result of that, we reach that of the Buddha bodies, the resultant state of Buddha bodies. So, conscious. So we are on page 94. The Bodhisattva Mahasattva Maitreya then replied to the Venerable Sharadhatiputra, Venerable Shariputra, with regard to dependent arising. What dependent arising is in the statement made by the Bhagavan, the Lord of Dharma, the omniscient one. Bhikshus, whoever sees dependent arising sees the Dharma, whoever sees Dharma sees the Buddha, and so forth. So with regard to dependent origination, there is the dependent origination in the sense of causality, law of causality. By understanding this, you create the causes for higher rebirth, and understanding that of the dependent origination in the sense of designation, dependent designation, you create the causes for liberation. So, with regard to this, in the commentary to Tattva Samgraha by Kamalashila, which has 2 volumes, he mentions that seeing the causality, law of causality, you create the causes for higher rebirth. And the understanding dependence in the sense of how things are designated, you create the causes for liberation. So our goal is that of the definite goodness. So whoever sees dependent arising sees the Dharma. So as Ratnavali says, first you attain higher rebirth and then the definite goodness. So in order to reach definite goodness, attain definite goodness, you need to have understanding using intelligence or wisdom. And this is possible for human beings with this marvelous brain. And so this kind of human rebirth that we have now is something that is even admired by those bodhisattvas in the Sukhavati paradise as well. And so by using this intelligence that we have, we need to create first the causes for higher rebirth, for which Ratnavali mentions 16 different factors for reaching higher rebirth, and then having attained rebirth, you need to work for liberation, definite goodness. And if you are able to by these, practice, then you will be able to see how this human life is precious and meaningful, and how rare it is to find such a human rebirth. And so you could actually meditate also on those of the precious human life with endowments and or freedom and fortune, and meditation on the impermanent nature of our life, and so forth. And so when you understand these well, then you will understand the significance of relying on a guru as well. And so a master or a guru, there's no way one could, with regard to a guru, there's no way one could tame others without oneself being tamed. And therefore, first, the person himself or herself must be tamed themselves. And the process of taming oneself is not just by any kind of practices from here and there, but one needs to actually practice the 3 trainings. And so before quoting this Mahayana Sutra, Alamkara by Maitreya, Master Tsongkhapa actually goes through this explanation that one needs to have the qualifications of a guru, such as those of the practitioners. So otherwise, the gurus would be rather disgraced to themselves and others. For example, we had in Haryana, in India, the so there was this the Punjabi teacher who finally landed in prison, and so this is a disgrace. So, with regard to taming one's mind, you may say that you have done some retreat on deity yoga practice and you are very sharp in, accurate in divination and so forth. That doesn't make you a fully qualified teacher as such. But with regard to the teaching of the Buddha, which is twofold, for the scripture, you need scriptural teaching, you need to be able to teach others and practice it and understand it yourself. And with regard to the realization dharma, you need to have the experience of the teaching, and beginning with that of the practice of morality. For example, celibacy, by keeping the vows of celibacy, such as novice monks and nuns and bhikshus and bhikshunis. And so, on the basis of that, you need to develop the other trainings, such as concentration and wisdom. Therefore, it is very important to have a fully qualified teacher to be able to tame others. One should be tamed oneself through these means. One time, I met one Chinese who told me that Tibetans come to China proper, claiming to be Dharma Rajas, king of Dharma. But as time passed, this person told me that these so-called Dharma Rajas finally are known. What they come to know is they were there in China proper for money and women. So if this person asked me if I could do something about this, and I told him I cannot. I told this person I cannot do much. From here, I am living in India, and what you as Chinese can do is that you need to check these persons proclaiming to be Dharma Rajas, king of Dharma, whether they have the full qualification of a Dharma teacher or not. And you should actually learn these qualifications of a teacher and then check them. If they really qualify, you should take them as teachers, your teachers. If they don't qualify, first just regard them as your assistant in the Dharma, friends in the Dharma, but not as your guru as such. And then when you find the person to be really corroborating in his behavior with the teaching, the qualifications, then you should take them as your teacher. And therefore, having learned, having studied the Dharma, it is very important not just to leave it at some kind of intellectual understanding, but make it your own experience. And so, the verse from Mula Madhyamaka Karika is very significant. Karma and afflictions, ending karma and afflictions, there is liberation. Karma and afflictions arise through conceptions, exaggerated outlook, and these in turn arise through elaboration. And so I have received the teaching on this Mula Madhyamaka Karika from Kuno Lama Rinpoche Tenzin Gyaltsen from Kinor. And so the final line in this verse says, this is ended by emptiness. And so, in the Sanskrit version, since the Kuno Lama Rinpoche Tenzin Gyaltsen knew Sanskrit well, he said in Sanskrit you could actually have two interpretations here. One is, it is ended, this elaboration or fabrication is ended by the understanding of emptiness, and which shows that shows that of the true cessation, and referring to the true cessation. And when you actually interpret it in the sense that this elaboration of fabrication ends within that of the emptiness, it refers to that of the path. And so samsara and nirvana are posited on the basis of having the realization of emptiness or not. And so, whoever sees Dharma sees the Buddha. So maybe we could interpret it in this way. Understanding of law of causality. On the basis of that understanding, we create the complete cause for the Buddha's form body, and on the basis of understanding that of the designated nature of we could create the causes for this Dharmakaya, which is this total absorption in emptiness in the Buddha's mind. So, well, the phrase dependent arising means that something arises because something else already exists. Something is born because something else was already born. And so samsara is the state which arises through the ignorance of the reality. And nirvana is that which arises by understanding the reality. That is to say, ignorance causes formation, formation causes consciousness, consciousness causes name and form, name and form causes the 6 sources, the 6 sources cause contact, contact causes sensation, sensation causes craving, craving causes appropriation, appropriation causes becoming, becoming causes birth, and birth causes aging, death, sorrow, lamentation, suffering, distress, unhappiness, and turmoil. Thus does this entire great heap of suffering. So this shows how the suffering of samsara comes about. And then next, as to how we reach nirvana is shown. When ignorance ceases, formation ceases. When formation ceases, consciousness ceases, name and form ceases. When name and form cease, the 6 senses cease. Sense source ceases. When the 6 sense source ceases, contact ceases. When contact ceases, formation ceases. When sensation ceases, craving ceases, when craving ceases, appropriation ceases, when appropriation ceases, becoming ceases, when becoming ceases, birth ceases, when birth ceases, aging, death, sorrow, lamentation, suffering, unhappiness, distress, and disturbance cease. Thus does this entire heap of suffering cease. This is what the Bhagwan has called dependent origin. What is the Dharma? The Dharma is the eightfold path of the noble ones: right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. This eightfold path of the noble ones combined with the attainment of its results in nirvana is what the Bhagwan called the Dharma. So these eightfold noble paths, so with regard to them, these can also be the form application or establishment of mindfulness and so forth, can be also aligned with the five-fold path. And then the eightfold path can also be divided into the three trainings, the trainings of morality, concentration, and wisdom. So the correct action, livelihood, and so forth can be included within that of the morality, and speech also, and then mindfulness, concentration, and so forth into that of the concentration and so forth. Who is the Bhagwan Buddha? A Buddha, so called because of comprehending all Dharma, is endowed with the wisdom of eye of the noble ones and the body of Dharma, and thus perceives the Dharma of those still in training and those beyond training. So page number 96. Why is it called dependent arising? It is called dependent arising because it is causal and conditional, not non-causal and non-conditional. In this connection, the Bhagavan concisely taught the characteristics of dependent arising as follows. Results come from their own specific conditions. Whether Tathagatas appear or not, this true nature of things will remain. So the true nature of things is something that is nature. It's not because of some karma of sentient beings or the enlightened deeds of the Buddha that they come about. So as it says here, so whether the Buddhas appear or not, this true nature of things will remain. It is the true nature, the constancy of Dharma, the immutability of Dharma, consistent with dependent arising suchness and unmistaken suchness, unchanging suchness, actuality, truth, unmistaken, unerring. Moreover, dependent arising emerges from two principles. From what two principles? From a causal relation and a conditional relation. Furthermore, it should be seen as twofold, outer and inner. So here it refers to those of the compounded phenomena in terms of dependent arising in terms of compounded phenomena. What is the causal relation in other dependent arising? It is as follows. From a seed comes a sprout, from a sprout a leaf, from leaf stem, from a stem a pedestal, from the pedestal a pistil, from pistil a flower, and from a flower comes a fruit. If there is no seed, the sprout cannot arise, and so on, until finally, without the flower, the fruit cannot arise. If there is seed, the sprout will form, and so on, until finally there is flower, then the fruit will form. So I'll not read all the text. So with regard to these products, each cause has a potential, its own potential to give rise to its effect. And therefore, the Samkhya philosophical school assert that the nature is within the cause and that of the product, that nature is same. So even today, the scientists are saying that when you go check into the DNA, there's some kind of a blueprint in the seeds that gives rise to some fruit and so forth. And so the Sankhyas claiming that the seed, the product is within the seed is, seems to be, have some reason. And Vaibhashikas, when they talk about the products or compounded phenomena, they say there is an arising moment and arisal moment and abiding moment. And so, and then decaying and finally perishing, destruction. Whereas Sautrantikas and the schools above that, for them, the very fact that something comes into being through its cause is it is subject to destruction or disintegration. That disintegration comes about through the very cause which gives rise to it. So, for example, when we see a change in a week, the change that happens in a week happens each day. The changes each day happens each hour, and each hour, each minute, and then each second, and each fraction of seconds, and so forth. And so things change. Moment by moment change in things is not because of some other factor, a third factor, but the very factor which gives rise to something is the cause for its destruction and disintegration, and therefore arising and destruction are simultaneous in that sense. And so when we say this, sometimes, it may you may find it surprising. How can that be? But if you carefully think through, you will be able to see it. So with regard to the things arising through their own causes and conditions, we can understand the theory of evolution as well. And the whole universe comes into being through its causes and conditions. And then there is a period when the universe remains, and then there is the destruction phase. And so, of course, with regard to the external material things, we do not necessarily relate them to karma, but when the role of pain and pleasure comes in, then we can talk about the karma. So in our literature, there is mention of a space element from which arises that of the energy, which is the movement of energy. From that arises heat. Heat, we do not need necessarily to have the conception of fire as such, but heat, from there, liquid, and then solid. So these are nature. The formation of these things are nature. And then, at the time of dissolution, earth element dissolves into the water, water into fire, fire into wind, and then that into space. And in the internal world, then the space element dissolves into that of this consciousness. And within the consciousness, also we relate this is related with some kind of a space where we use the terms first empty state and second empty state and down to the fourth empty state. And so
the text Page number 97. So how is the conditional relation in outer dependent arising to be seen? As due to the coming together of 6 elements, as due to the coming together of which 6 elements, namely conditional dependent arising, is to be seen as due to coming together of the elements of earth, water, fire, wind, space, and season. The earth element functions as the support for the seed. And when we speak about the space, usually this may be the space as empty or the hollow nature of the sky. The fire element ripens the seed, the wind element opens the seed, the space element performs the function of not obstructing the seed, and season transforms the seed. Without these conditions, a sprout cannot form from a seed. But when the outer element of earth is not deficient, and likewise water, fire, wind, space, and season are not deficient, then from the coming together of all these factors, a sprout forms, and as the seed is ceasing. So these are all the nature of all the phenomena, and when we subject them to further analyzations, we usually have 4 reasons: the reasons of the actions and the reasons of relying. So these 2, again, when we analyze further, it has to again come to the reason of nature. So may all the defilements and all the misconceptions be eliminated. So therefore, the reason of nature is the ultimate reason here. The earth, continue reading, the earth element does not think, I shall act as a support to the seed, nor does the water element think, I shall moisten the seed, nor does the fire element think, I shall ripen the seed, nor does the wind element think, I shall open the seed, nor does the space element think, I shall make sure the seed is not obstructed, nor does the season think, I shall transform the seed, nor does the seed think, I shall form the sprout, nor does the sprout think, I am formed by these conditions. Page number 98, the third para. Thus is the conditional relation in outer dependent arising to be seen. Here, outer dependent arising is to be seen in terms of 5 aspects. What are those 5 aspects? As not permanent, as not discontinuous, as not involving transmigration, as the formation of a large result from a small cause, and as a continuity of similar type. How is it not permanent? It is not permanent because the sprout and seed are different. So when we spoke about the cause giving rise to a result, this is something evident that we can all see. And the reason why there is an objective existence is that there is a result, there is a cause, and due to that cause give rise to an objective result. So it is not merely due to dependent upon each other. So this kind of notion that they do have independent or objective existence comes. So therefore, Nagarjuna and the other masters introduce different ways of reasoning in order to eliminate the notion of objective existence from the point of cause and from the point of result and from the both and so on. So in this resonance, they analyze the nature or the nature of the phenomena from whether they are one or multiple. Then when we analyze from the result, whether they exist as it is being perceived. So if they have their inherent existence, then they won't be able to produce anything. So this coming from the 70 verses on emptiness by Nagarjuna. So analyzing whether things have their own objective existence from the point of their result.
안들도 어시스에 대해서 어디에 다 강조 그다음 그게 딱 강다서 서울 딱 가야
And the first reasonings usually look at or analyze from the point of negations. But when it comes to the ultimate reasoning, which is the king of reasonings, the reasoning of dependent arising, it has the potential to eliminate all the both extremes. And as the dependent origination in Tibetan term as tendel, so that first term ten has a connotation of being reliant upon another factors and another source. And in Bodhgaya, it also states that if things do exist from their objective way, then why are they designated? So there is no need to there is no need to identify the objects as mere designations if they can be identified from their own objective existence. So, but in reality, things can be only identified or understood from the point of their different actions and different properties. So, this is a phrase coming from the Buddha Palita, and Nagarjuna himself also stated that if the things have their own objective existence, then there is no way that they will have a cause and effect. So since the compounded phenomena by nature have this quality of being the cause and effect, so in this way, this actually proves that they do not have an inherent existence. So the first term for tendel, the ten, actually eliminates the objective existence. Then second, arising, which is the Jung. Jung speaks about the phenomena or all the things as being common to our conventional realities. So therefore, the combination of these two terms, the dependent and arising, when it comes to the very subtle realizations and subtle understanding, then that wisdom realizing that dependent, very subtle nature of dependent arising has the potential to eliminate both extremisms, both extremes. And the appearance and also the empty nature of the things are not only, they are not contradictory to each other, but they are empty of their objective existence. So therefore they are able to identify as empty of inherent existence. And as the Lama Tsongkhapa stated in the three principal part, that when one gains the realizations that there is a non-contradictory between the appearance and the empty nature of the thing, then one completes the understanding of emptiness. So continue reading from page number 98. Here, outer dependent arising is to be seen in terms of 5 aspects. What are those 5 aspects? As not permanent, as not discontinuous, as not involving transmigration, as the formation of a large result from a small cause, and as a continuity of similar type. How is it not permanent? It is not permanent because the sprout and the seed are different. The sprout is not the seed. The sprout does not come from the seed after it has ceased, nor does it come from the seed while it has not yet ceased. Rather, the sprout is born precisely as the seed ceases. How is it not discontinuous? It is not discontinuous because a sprout is not born from a seed that has already ceased. So in page number 99, so thus is outer dependent arising to be seen in terms of 5 aspects. Similarly, inner dependent arising also arises from 2 principles. So from what two principle, from a causal relation and a conditional relations. So this may be referring to its primary cause and secondary causes. So dependent arising pertaining to the cause and effect, we may have two categories. So this is speaking about from the truth of suffering, those belonging to the part that need to be eliminated. So we all are same that we do not want unhappiness and suffering, but the suffering continues to come, but they all come with different causes and conditions. They do not sufferings doesn't arise without any cause. So ultimately it is the very mind which is not tame within us that is the source of all the happiness. And if we analyze further, then it is the ignorance, the not knowing the fact or reality. As we discussed before, so many people are engulfed with the materialistic development, and they feel that only the materialistic development will be able to eliminate all the sufferings, but that is not the case. So generally we have the natural sufferings of our birth and aching and illness and so on, and upon that there are so many extra sufferings that are met in this world. And ultimately they are all coming through the untamed wild mind that is possessed within us. What then is the causal relation in inner dependent arising? Continue reading from page number 99. Second last para. It starts with ignorance causing formations and so on, until finally birth causes aging and death. If ignorance does not arise, then formations do not manifest and so on, until finally, if birth does not arise, then aging and death do not manifest. Likewise, from the existence of ignorance, formations occur and so on, until finally, from the existence of birth comes aging and death. Ignorance does not think I produce formations, nor do formations think we are produced by ignorance, and so on. Finally, birth does not think I produce aging and death, nor do aging and death think I am produced by birth. Nevertheless, formations take form and arise through the existence of ignorance, and so on, until finally aging and death take form and arise through the existence of birth. His Holiness comments that maybe it's more relevant to the humans who have this gross human body, who are residing in the desire realm. Continue reading from page number 100, second para. How is the conditional relation in inner dependent arising to be seen as due to the coming together of 6 elements? As due to the coming together of what 6 elements, namely the conditional relation in inner dependent arising is to be seen as due to the coming together of the elements of earth, water, fire, wind, space, and consciousness. So when we speak about the wind element here, so it's not only the moving nature, but within all the channels that the minds move from each other. So here it's referred to as the functions of the wind element. Continue reading from page 100. Here, what is the earth element in our inner dependent arising? That which assembles to form the solidity of the body is called the earth element. That which provides cohesion in the body is called the water element. That which digests whatever the body eats, drinks, chews, and tastes is called the fire element. That which performs the functions of the body's inhalation and exhalation is called the wind element. That which allows the body to have hollow spaces inside is called the space element. That which produces the sprouts of name and form like reeds in a sheaf, the combination of the 5 collections of consciousness. So from here on, it speaks about the disintegration. As we discussed before, so due to the existence of the ignorance, the other afflicted emotions continue to arise. So the distorted conceptual thought is the actual cause to arising of all the attachment and the anger within us. So the intensity of the distorted conceptual thoughts will actually decide the intensity of our anger and so on. So recently one of my friends has said that there was an article written by a Chinese quantum physicist. Did I said it before? I have a doubt regarding that. For many years, so those quantum physicists, whether not merely by their intelligence, power, or capacity, that they describe the nature of the phenomena as not having their objective existence, but from their own mind, whether they can do some experiments, whether it will help in analyzing the way the attachments and the anger arises within us. And I asked a few people regarding that, and recently there was an article written by a Chinese quantum physicist, and in the article he has written that so the person who has seen that there is not a reality objective existence, so for that particular person it tends to be less stronger grasping of the things as positive and negative. So that sense of grasping of the positive and negative things seems to be less intensity in that person. And even if we take our own experiences, for example, in our mind, so the meditation will not come easily, but wisdom coming through the listening, the merely wisdom coming through the listening is not that strong, but whatever you have heard and you have read, so also through many texts combining together, then if you further do reflections and contemplations, and then we will reach a kind of realizations. One of the followers of Nagarjuna, Bhava Viveka, so in its The Blazing of Reasoning, a commentary to his own text, so he has listed the views of all the different non-Buddhist Indian traditions in that text. So it is very important to analyze and to know the different views coming from the different traditions. Why the Nalanda University was able to produce so many brilliant scholars with brilliant intelligence is because that they have contact with so many other non-Buddhist scholars and their views, and while defeating their arguments. So therefore, both the Buddhist and the non-Buddhist scholars have been benefiting each other by their own arguments and defeating each other. So in this way, by following the experiments and through analyzations, having seen so many different things, heard different things, and they analyze further what are the reasons behind their assertions, how to give a befitting answer to that kind of assertions. So this really helps them sharpen their mind. For example, the 4 tenets within our Buddhist philosophical systems, and what are the intentions behind their particular assertion about something, and how we have to give a befitting, fitting reply to those assertions. So therefore, it is very important to do experiments. So merely taking everything for granted is not good. And many of us usually goes after our belief. And I think this is not so a good word, but if someone says anything that is against their belief, then they may say you are the followers of you have wrong view. So it is important to raise the different doubts, and following this doubt we have to do experiments. So this is very important as a part of generating the wisdom coming through the contemplations. I used to joyfully, jokingly said that most of the Nalanda scholars are from South India. So the brain of the South Indians are something.
Without alternation, then you will not be attracted or by that of the extreme views. So today I'll stop here. Maybe there are people who are leaving the next days. So tomorrow when we come back, we'll first do the ceremony for generation of bodhicitta. And then I'll also give some transmissions of some mantras. And then continue the teaching. And tomorrow the chief minister of this state of Bihar will also be here. And so we'll have a short program with him. And so that's all for today. Da kun geje su ta rob chin ke wa de da tam che rob do ngo de sum shik be ke wa tam che ke ngo wa kan la cho do nga ba de da yi ke we zo wa sang bo chi chi rob do ngo wa re ki zen kham so chen ba ta nye ba ni we shin du den zen po nu shin du ten ba yi ten ba yu ri ne be ta shi sho